Good afternoon, everyone, and Assalamu alaikum. My name is Zishan Aslam, and I'm your host today. So, this session will be on the topic Is Populism the Future of Democracy? And to discuss it, we have Tuba Eldem from SWP Berlin, Aristotle Tympas from University of Athens, and S.Akbar Zaidi from IBA Karachi, and they will be discussing it with Ammar Ali Jan, an academic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and welcome to this panel on populism. I'll briefly, because we're a little late, so I'll just very briefly introduce the panelists. We have with us Dr. Tuba Eldem, who did a PhD from the University of Toronto and works on issues of authoritarianism and geostrategic issues in the Middle East, if I'm correct, and Turkey. We also have with us Dr. Aristotle Tympas. He is a theorist based at the University of Athens, and we'll be very interested in learning about the problems of populism and authoritarianism in Europe from him. And then last but not least, we have Dr. Akbar Zaidi, who is a renowned political economist and a vice chancellor of IBA. So today's discussion is going to be on a topic which is extremely pertinent, not only in Pakistan, where we're seeing movements that are being termed populist, but it is one of the biggest political debates or debates in political science, in political sociology, and in political theory taking place around the world. And the big question is, does a right-wing populist threaten a country's democratic order, constitutional order, or liberal order? And this question has become extremely pertinent after the emergence of what people are calling populist or authoritarian figures within some of the oldest democracies, including in the US with Mr. Trump, then after the Brexit vote in England, then with the rise of Marine Le Pen in France, and the rise of Narendra Modi in India. So this whole idea of illiberal democracies has become very central to questions on political theory, which then leads to the question, as I stated earlier, can these democracies, these institutions, these constitutions survive the onslaught by populist movements? Before we start, I'd also like to mention that this term populism, it's an incredibly elusive term. People talk about populism all the time, but we're still not exactly sure what we mean by populism. Does it mean looking at the existing consciousness, the ghosts that haunt the unconscious of a society and mobilize them for a certain cause? Does it mean raising genuine issues of the people? There are many theorists on the left who also say we need a left-wing populism, which means raising genuine concerns of the people on a populist register. Or is it simply a new term that's a veiled way of saying that we're dealing with a new form of fascism? So these are all questions that theorists are debating, and this panel is an ideal place to take this debate forward, because as I just introduced these theorists and political scientists, they've been working on this question for a very long time and have written on the subject. And I'll begin just to let you know, we're going to try to have 2 rounds of questions. We'll take about 40 minutes, so 7 minutes each. And then after that, we're going to open the floor to open this session for questions from the floor. Okay, my first question is for Dr. Tuba Eldem. You're in Pakistan, and people here are extreme fans of some of the dramas from your country. Ertugrul being one of the more famous ones. So there's this kind of this circulation of populist or nostalgic ideas that are being used by a lot of groups to win support. My question to you is, how do you describe the current state of populism or authoritarianism in Turkey? And I would also like to know your point of view on the idea of populism. What is your definition of populism? Doctor.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here with you. I had given another talk yesterday, and I thought that, how also the Turks view Pakistani people. We have like a very long lasting friendship, and we always consider Pakistani as a brotherly nation, very dear to our hearts. So in that manner, I'm very happy to be here. It's my first time in Pakistan. Thank you. Of course, as you mentioned, populism, as many other terms in political science or social sciences in general, has defined very differently by different scholars. So it is considered as an ideology or a discourse, or sometimes as a movement or strategy. For me, I think most commonly used definition is offered by Kasmude, which is defined as, or who defined populism as a thinly-centered ideology that divides the society into two opposing groups, as poor people as opposed to the corrupt elite. And also this ideology considers that the politics should be an expression of the general will of the society. So in a sense that then one of the basic elements of the concept of populism concerns the majority rule or majoritarianism, which brings into mind the challenge of reconciling democracy with the tyranny of majority, which is first put forward by John Stuart Mill in the 19th century. So this brings me to the relationship between populism and democracy. Basically, there are three different views in the literature. One of them is the radical view, which basically consider populism as an essential element of democracy, in the sense that it brings the disadvantaged sectors of the society into politics by giving them a voice in politics. So in a sense, this view of populism consider populism as a discourse that appeal to the people against the established power block or established structures of the society, and that also reject existing forms of subordination, and defines or calls for a struggle against the power block in the society. So in that sense, this view is mostly reflected in Latin America, and also I think in the left-wing wave of populism. The liberal view, on the other hand, consider populism as a pathology of democracy that needs to be corrected. As Tympas define, it is illiberal democracy. Illiberal democracy. So I think one of the why it is illiberal, because it has a homogeneistic view of the society. So it considers the view of the majority as the only voice of the society. So this is one of the problem. And the second of the problem is it also disregards this aristocratic part of the representative democracy. And maybe the most important shortcoming of populism is its disregard of checks and balances, because it only gives priority to the general will. So quite related to this is the definition or the mechanisms offered by Levitsky and Loxton in their analysis of populism and competitive authoritarianism. in the Andes region and in Latin America. They say that if the populists come to government, they have a tendency to change the democratic regime towards competitive authoritarianism because of three basic reasons. The one is generally the leaders are coming, the populist leaders are coming out of the established party system. So they are basically the newcomers to the system, and they are not very much familiar or experienced with the rules and the principles of representative politics. So when they come into power, generally the tendency is the personalization of politics. So first is then the personalization of politics. The second is the anti-establishment appeals. And the third is the disregard for horizontal accountability. So when we look at the Turkish case, we see more empirical evidence in support of the theory offered by Loxton and Levinsky in Latin America. So the first, I can say that despite, when the AKP came to power back in 2002, or Justice and Development Party, everybody was looking very positively, especially, even the Western world, that, it will be a model for Muslim democracy. And we can say that at least up until 2007, maybe we can talk more positively about this, because at that time still the state establishment was quite strong. So we have the high judiciary, and the military relatively was playing a more stronger role compared to the liberal democracies of the Western world. So in the first term of power, the AKP tried to follow a defensive strategy in order to survive in the regime. So basically, AKP appealed to the West, especially to the European Union, and tried to promote itself as a reformist democratic force in the society. This lasted until 2005, but after 2005, also the criticism or the unwillingness of some of the Western governments to accept Turkey to the EU has been voiced more often. So in tandem with the weakening of the Europeanization, the government also started to refrain from pro-EU force. So starting with, especially in the 2007, as the Loxton and Levinsky theory foresaw, the constitutional crisis triggered by the upcoming presidential elections has led to the demise of the defensive strategy of the ruling party, and started to use an offensive strategy, offensive populist strategy, targeting all the state establishment by anti-establishment appeals, and by presenting themselves as the oppressed, as the representative of the oppressed Muslims, or we can call, they call themselves as the Black Turks. So this new strategy paid off, and since 2007, the AKP government has won all the elections. But this under a charismatic and populist leader who comes from the outside of the national party system, Turkey has experienced, unfortunately, one of the worst democratic backsliding cases in the world today. So basically, Turkish media has been, the voice of Turkish media has been cut off. All the free media has been taken over by state takeovers and given to pro-governmental businesses. So this, Turkey's 2010 constitutional referendum, August 2014 presidential elections, November 2015 parliamentary elections, and 2017 constitutional referendum, and the June 28 presidential and parliamentary elections were found unfair by the international observers in terms of opposition access to the media. So not only, of course, the media, but also all kind of state institutions have been politicized. So there has been judicial autonomy has been restricted, clientelism have been increased, corruption has been increased, and all forms of civil liberties and fundamental freedoms have been restricted. And all of these has been done through the plebiscitarian and clientelistic linkages, and also through anti-establishment appeals. I can maybe talk about later after my fellow scholars continue.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ms. One of the questions we had for you was we've been noticing politics in the UK and the rest of Europe. Since Brexit, there's been this rise of illiberalism, of populism, of authoritarianism, and with the refugee crisis, the immigrant crisis, and now with Ukraine. What threats do you see to liberal democracy in Europe and in particular in Greece?
Thank you. Thank you very much. In my opinion, we cannot understand the rise of populism in Europe. My working hypothesis would be, as well as around the world, without understanding what became prevalent in recent decades. And the prevalent version of politics, the prevalent version of governing, has been that of the version of capitalism that we call neoliberalism. So it's the failure of, it's a double failure as connected to the rise of neoliberal capitalism that, in my opinion, can explain what went wrong. The first comes from the center-left. The UK is an exemplar case here. When the agenda of the Social Democratic Party of the UK, the Labour Party, gradually but quite fast, completely endorsed the Thatcherist agenda and turned into a neoliberalist perspective, when the agenda of similar parties from Italy to the Scandinavia turned out actually from social democracy to neoliberalism, and when at the same time on the right side, parties elected as liberal very quickly endorsed a neoliberalist agenda. Of course, variations aside, one could say at the same time by endorsing a neoliberalist agenda, endorsing populism and making contact with the right and the ultra-right in some cases, then this combined move, which is a product of one and the same historical motion, and the other face of this, as I already actually suggested, is the rise of neoliberal capitalism. Then we have the explanation of the description, if you prefer, the reason, the cause, that can lead us to an explanation of the historical specificity of the current version of neoliberalism. To answer the question of our panel directly, is populism the future of democracy? I hope not. I'm sure everybody hopes not. And I made just very quickly one more thing, just to come closer to my field of expertise. Part of the same move, I think, it is not discussed as an important dimension, in my opinion, since I'm an historian and sociologist of technology, I think it is, has to do with the populism in regards to technology. Populism that uses technology, we are all familiar with this, the reliance on social media, for example, and other forms of media to advance populism. And here, I will make a special point that this is even more dangerous than in the past, the use of the media, because the prevalence, the introduction of algorithms, the so-called artificial intelligence and technologies, the feeding of big data in a completely unregulated manner, has created a black box that determines what would come out when news are being fed in a manner that's completely outside democratic scrutiny. But then there is a second one, and I'll finish with a second dimension that has to do actually with the populism about technology itself. who remembers now that up to 10, 15 years ago, everybody in Europe was talking about an information revolution that will free us from labor and all this. In retrospect, this was a populist talk. The way we talk about artificial intelligence today is populistic. By claiming that, by presenting artificial intelligence from the right, from the neoliberal right and from the neoliberal center-left, presenting all this as the saviors of humanity, going as far as saying that what will save us from the environmental crisis is more technology, artificial intelligence, smart grids and smart that. That's a populistic talk that's extremely dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tympas. And, his experience is particularly illuminating because not only because of his expertise in technology, and what he's referring to is now a huge, huge debate across the world on what kind of democracy there will be with these kinds of tech giants and the kind of data that they have, and the way they can manipulate populations, the way governments and corporations can manipulate populations. But also, Greece in particular has been the site of the worst form of neoliberal policies that have destroyed the economic and social fabric of the country, and has seen the rise of new movements, both from the left, but also movements like the Golden Dawn and right-wing movements. So we'd like to come back to that as well at some point. Dr. Zaidi, we know in Pakistan, there's a lot of debate on around Imran Khan as this outsider who's a popular, some of the things that Dr. Eldem and Dr. Tympas has talked about. An outsider taking on the establishment, a very personalized way of running politics, but also his image as a clean person, that's very much part of the appeal. And being a little fuzzy on some of the big contradictions that exist in Pakistan. So how do you categorize both populism, but also how do you categorize the current moment in Pakistan? Are we in a populist moment?
Okay, I think this works. I don't need that. Okay, thank you very much. I think Professor Eldem sort of explained and the different forms of populism, but I'm going to take a very different view from what my participants here have taken. First of all, I think populism is a term in which you can put everything. Everybody is a populist. Whenever you want, you can create somebody as a populist. If you give free laptops, it's a populist. If you give free atta, that's you're being populist measures. If you take on the big bad establishment, you're supposed to be a populist. So I think populism has become a term which has lost much of its meaning because we all know what we're talking about. We all know what populism. We see it and we say this is populism and this isn't. You can tell often. But I think it's a term which has emerged. It's a 21st century term. That's also, although I'll come back to that. In its current form, it's a 21st century term. But I want to go back to a lot of things that you said, Ammar, which I think are not correct. So your introduction. First of all, you said right-wing populism. Then you said fascism. Then you said new term. All three things are wrong. I completely disagree. First of all, it's not a new term. It started with Perón in the 1940s from Latin America. It's a very well-established, in Argentina, Juan Perón. That's where we get the first sort of modern notions of populism, and populism is a modern term. And what happens after that, it completely disappears from the map. Because you have democracy, you have coups, you have guerrilla movements, you have fascist movements in Brazil, in Argentina, Uruguay, Pakistan, Turkey, wherever you name it, Latin America, East Asia as well. So the nature of politics changes. And I think if you look at Perón, we seem to have forgotten Argentina as sort of the first space of populism. But you're right that it's a new term because it's a new term for the 21st century. And now we've got these characters who have emerged, who we call populists, and we call their type of politics populism. The second thing is, it's not only right-wing. Chavez is also a populist. I mean, there's left-wing. Just because you like him, you're not calling him a populist. We know you like him. I like him as well. So, but the same sort of features which you just spoke about, Professor Eldem, you distinguish three types, what you call radical, let's call it left, liberal, and right wing. So I think, and that's the problem with populism, that it fits everywhere, right? So if Chavez nationalizes the petroleum industry, we leftists say, Zabardast, very fantastic, well done. If Trump says, I'm going to do this to this person, we say, what is this fascism? So I think that it's such a flexible term that it can be used across things. But I think we need to emphasize that populism is not just a right-wing term. If Imran Khan was left-wing and populist, we'd be part of that party, but he's not. He's never going to be. But that would be something that we would. Bhutto is also termed as a populist, and he was, and lots of people here would have supported him and did, and they still ascribe to that philosophy. So I think that's something to remember. And populism is you call it fascism, but I disagree. I think one of the key instruments of fascism is a political party. Now, populism by design is anti-political party. It's not a party. It's an individual. It's charisma. It's a person. I am the people. Partha Chatterjee has this book called I Am the People, where the arguments on populism, where he talks about this whole idea, and which I think you also both refer to in some ways, that when you become a populist, you disregard all norms, and you take over the Supreme Court. You take over the financial markets. You want to be representative as an individual. So fascism actually requires a political movement, and it requires a political party. So populism is authoritarian, whether left or right. Chavez is a good populist because he's leftist for some of us, and Trump is a bad because he's a horrible man, right? And there are others as well in between. So I think we need to distinguish that, and that's the problem with this term. It can be used very effectively. So one thing that, I'm surprised people don't notice this, that almost all populists are men. But there's something wrong with that, they're very, we know that there's a problem. I'm coming to that, except for it. So, there are one or two. But I'm going to make a different point. That most populists, not all, most populist leaders in the current age are men, and there's also a very strong misogynistic view. Trump and Imran Khan are brothers and kin when it comes to women. Their attitude. So you can see that. It's a very misogynistic thing. And you're right, Italy and Le Pen in France, but you look at the way they sort of, they look at women as well. It's also, it's a very different type of, they're not feminists at all. They're not even, liberal in the sense of looking at gender. There's a very hard, anti-abortion, for example, something of that nature. So there is a very hardcore element of populism, whether you're a woman biologically or whether you're a man. So that's something else that we need to remember. Now, I actually think populism is finished. Now, you said, how could that be? But I'll tell you why. I think it was it's linked to an individual in all the countries, whether it's Bolsonaro, whether it's Erdogan, whether it's Trump, whether it's Imran Khan. You remove the individual and you remove populism. Now, this is one of the I think one of the weaknesses of this concept, because it's hit us in our face in the 21st century with people like Trump and Imran Khan and Bolsonaro and Erdogan and Duterte and so many others around us, and Oban in Hungary. So they've emerged, I agree with you there, that they emerged through this technological revolution. They emerge at a moment when the left is in crisis. Post-Soviet Union, what does the left do? Where do we look for? There are no answers. There's no sort of notion of social democracy anymore. We're looking at, what is socialism today? It was something before 1989, right, wrong, false, orange, red, pink, doesn't matter. But now, post-1989, after the Berlin Wall, there's an absence of ideology amongst the left. And then what happens in that space? You get, actors like Trump, Bolsonaro, all these people that we've named who emerge. And it's also a technological revolution that takes place. And I think you're right, absolutely right. That's very fundamental to how this has been played out. And you also have Chavez, and you have a couple of others on the left as well. So I think that's the broad, very convoluted notion of populism. But now coming back to Imran Khan. So, Imran Khan is an authoritarian individual, monarchist. He's a monarchist more than, a democrat. And the title is Populism, the Future of Democracy. If we think about Pakistan, I wonder the question should be, is democracy the future of Pakistan? And for me, that's more worrying. I mean, a populist democrat, that's also a contradiction in terms, because I actually think populists can't be democratic, whether they're Chavez or whether they're Trump. And we've seen that, and especially if it's Imran Khan. Populism, by definition, is anti-democratic. They could get elected through the democratic process, in which they do in all these countries that we've named, but they do not remain democratic. I think the crisis that you spoke about, how there's been a complete backsliding of Turkish democracy, is a very good example of that. The fact that Lula is back in power, and he's also a populist, left-wing populist against Bolsonaro. The fact that in some ways, I think that in about 5 or 10 years, and I'm sure I'm going to be wrong, I think populism would have lost its shine that we see. And I think with Trump's with losing in the Congress elections and all that, his party, so he's been sidelined. And if populism is about an individual, once you remove the individual, if Imran Khan goes, retires, dies, whatever happens, the notion of populism in Pakistan collapses. There's no populism then. So if it's so ingrained with an individual, then as a theoretical concept, it's in deep trouble. Imran Khan as well, but the notion of populism as well.
Thank you so much. We'll take about one more round of 5 minutes just to clarify. Because I'm the moderator, I didn't really give my opinion on Chavez or anyone else. I do like him. I don't know how you know that. It's been a secret. I've been hiding it for a very long time.
I think
just to prop up my democratic credentials. And do you know my position on Stalin? That might be a little controversial as well here. Anyway. I was told to just ask questions, and I did mention left-wing populism because if I were to speak on it, I would have mentioned Chantal Mouffe and Laclau's very important work, which is a defense of populism from a left-wing perspective. But at the second round, I'm very interested in the question of the reasons for populism, which is something that was alluded by all the speakers. Dr. Tympas also mentioned it, and others as well. Are we going in a situation where, on one hand, we have a popular autocrat who nonetheless is loved by a large number of people, and all the Democrats who then either have to go to defend themselves. To defend themselves, they have to seek protection from the bureaucracy in Brussels, the European Union, or Rawalpindi in our case, as the only barrier in stopping this kind of authoritarianism. Can we, in other words, think of some other way, of a democratic way of countering this populism, or are we doomed between the bad and the worse?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, I would like to just say a few things about what Aristotle has said. Yes, social media, I think, is a new apparatus or new. It's a good instrument for the populist. It's a good instrument in their toolboxes. For example, in Turkey, there is a troll army of recently, just last week, the main opposition party has declared that there is a 8,000 troll army founded by the interior minister just to oppose or just to attack the opposition figure in the social media. In 2020, Twitter suspended more than 7,000 accounts in Turkey that are affiliated with the youth wing of the ruling party, which were using the Twitter and other social media platforms to cheerleader the president for the upcoming presidential elections. So, and Turkey has upcoming elections in June 2023. So also as a response to what you have been asked, and it's also related about the future of democracy. Because the Tony Blair Institute has recently made a research and identified 2023 as a critical year for the fate of populism. This is because there will be an elections in Turkey and also Poland. For when we look back to 2022, for the last year, we can say positive things because those people living under populist rule has been diminished by 80 million by 2022, and the number of populist leaders has reached to lowest in 20 years just because of the removal or the defeat of Bolsonaro in Brazil and also the populist leader in Slovenia and Duarte in Philippines. So there are reasons to be hopeful, and this year, the elections of Poland and Turkey will tell us a lot, but unfortunately in both countries the opposition parties failed to come up with a clear program. In Turkey, 6 opposition parties came together and formed the table of 6, what they call, but they have, there are political parties that are just departed from the ruling Justice and Development Party. One of them was our former Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoğlu, and the other is the Finance Minister Ali Babacan. They were part of the government and they just, left the ruling party in 2018, I think, recently, and they have, less than 1% vote. But now the Turkish, the opposition are discussing, they will get disproportionate power, they will get a lot of ministries or, a lot of MPs. So, of course, this creates, again, division within the opposition because the others are saying that, the other bigger parties are saying that not the parties, but mostly the public are voicing their criticisms. These parties have less than 1% of vote, but they are getting, disproportionate power. So this kind of petty political discussions are preventing the oppositional parties to become a united force. So for me, of course, nobody wants to see the populist rule, but I'm not very much optimist. Not for Turkey, but for the world. I think because this socioeconomic inequalities, both within the nations, but also inside the nations, are increasing. And there is a retreat from liberalism in the global governance system. Like we see the misuse of responsibility to protect norms in Libya. We see, the use of liberal norms for nationalistic interest, and we see, the troubles that the humanity have seen in Afghanistan and in Syria. So there is in the global governance, I think there are a lot of problems related with the liberalism. So I expect to see more assertive nationalism and retreat from globalization. Even in the United States, Biden administration is making the case of use American products and producing everything locally. So we expect to see that there will the economic globalization, I think, is going to be at least lose the pace. At least if we define populism as illiberal democracy, then I see the continuity of this trend in the upcoming years.
Thank you. I know that I will sound as if I want to provoke, but there are so many young people here that I feel responsible saying this. There was a time in the past that one, like Ernesto Laclau, like major thinkers of the left, could argue that populism healthy dose of populism may be fine. I don't think that's any longer the historical conjuncture that we live in. I mean, in front of the environmental crisis, the last thing that we need for the young people who carry on their shoulders an incredible weight. We don't know if we have a chance, actually. We have to act as if we do. The last thing that we need is actually from all political sides a message that misrepresents reality. There's such an urgent need to actually understand how bad the situation is like with the environmental crisis, and the social crisis associated with this, the inequalities and all that feed into it, that I can no longer see how any version of populism can actually help us. I mean, we very quickly need an exit from that. We need. I'm not going to say that we need the old type of scientific, objective knowledge. Postmodernism has taught us that even this is, problematic. But we really need a way to go beyond what's at the core of populism, meaning lying about what is actually realizable. And we need very quickly a realizable picture regarding what we can actually do about the future, especially the future of younger people. So my answer would be very negative. I no longer see any version of populism that could help. I will pass the question about Greece. If there is an interest in the audience, I would gladly come back to this and tell you my very personal opinion, because I think it's also very important to actually connect populism along in the direction that I suggested with what he brought us here also, which is masculine ideologies. I do agree that populism comes with a father figure that promises that he would give something in an easy manner, without work. And that's so problematic. Whereas the opposite, feminities, have always come with hard labor. They don't lie about how hard it is to actually handle things. And that's why I think, and in cases where there are women politicians, leading politicians, they are masculinized. I don't know the Italian case very well, but the case in France is not, you're not winning based on your feminities. You are winning based on the fact that you are reproducing this masculine model. And it's masculinity, it's capitalist ideology that brought us here. So any mix of masculine, capitalist ideologies, neoliberalism, with populism, I think it's extremely dangerous by now, because we're facing an unprecedented crisis. Thank you.
So, I'll return to the Imran Khan part of the question. It's always a fun topic. So there's no question about the fact that he is nationalistic, he's a savior, comes across as a savior, certainly misogynistic, all the elements that we talk about regarding the template for populism, however we define it, although there are problems how we define it. So Imran Khan fits that very well. Now, but the question is this. Now, democracy, Imran Khan, Pakistan, and so on and so forth, and populism. That at the we know that in 2018, Imran Khan, he was always a populist, he's still a populist, he's going to be a populist. So in 2018, he was brought into power by the military. The military confesses to that as well. Forget about Imran Khan saying so. So we know that happened. But today, in Pakistan, the reason why Imran Khan is so popular is not because of Imran Khan, it's because of this government that we have, which has made him popular. It's the PDM government which has destroyed itself. The PMLN has decimated itself and made Imran Khan a figure. So even if he was not a populist, even if he was, some lame duck former prime minister, he would win. So the argument that I'm making is that, populism, I will argue, is a momentary thing. It's been around, the modern form, it's been around for some years. I don't see it staying on. For example, if this crisis from April last year had not happened, and the process would have been allowed to unfold in Pakistan, Imran Khan would have been out. Probably the PMLN would have been in power, whether the military wanted it or not. There would have been some arrangement that, and this notion, and he in opposition, a populist is just a nuisance, largely that, and Imran Khan will always remain that. But in power, he's destructive. Exactly. For him, it's me, I. Everyone, I know you guys voted for him, so I didn't, so, you live with it. But you listen to his speeches, You listen to anybody, any populist speech, it's always I, me, I. That's about all. So, the society does not matter.
As sad as it may sound, but if a populist leader has decisive popularity, he has a right to rule the nation according to basic rules of democracy. What, according to you, is the necessary changes in the current democratic system of the world? So the populist leaders like Imran Khan or Erdogan, under the hacks of democracy when elected, they should not, to ensure that they do not violate the basic constitution or democratic rights or values for that.
We'll take 3 questions at least, and then who else? Okay, here and then one lady there. Yes, okay, yeah.
Speak loud.
Yeah.
My question is to the panel. It's very interesting that the panel pointed out about gender and populism. It's a very interesting observation. But I wonder what social media and journalism, how they have played a role in actually undermining the gender success. Because New Zealand Prime Minister or Finland President or Israeli Prime Minister, she was all a woman, and also German Prime Minister, they were not populists, but they were very successful leaders. But how the social media underplays everybody who's a success and actually highlights who's a populist.
Controversy.
And that draws an analogy for all the readers, the viewers, people like us, that this is successful and that is not successful. So this is a failure of the new technology that has come, social media. This is my observation, but I'd like to have answers from the panel.
Thank you. That's a very good question.
So my question is especially from you. So whenever there is an
There's no question from me, from the panel.
Oh, okay, from the panelists, yes. Okay.
I don't have an opinion.
Okay, fine. So whenever there is an economic crisis, especially because of the capitalist economic policies failure, so it is the populist who takes over instead of the left wing, because they have been already criticizing the economic policies of especially the capitalist class. So why it is only and specifically the populist leader who just take over after every economic crisis? Thank you.
Like, why can't the left present a similar or a critique that's as inspiring as, let's say, the right is presenting? I think that's what's right. We can. Okay, so we'll start from Zaidi sir. Will start.
Okay.
From you.
So this question of social media, I think very, very, very good one. I think maybe social media is masculine. If it has a gender, it's male. These days you can't even talk about gender anymore. They say कि binary कुछ नहीं होता है. Anyway, but maybe social media is either controlled by men. I mean, all these the men who control, all the people who control social media happen to be men, whatever their politics, and they have a role to play in that. So maybe, I mean, you study social media, maybe you can comment on that, whether it actually has a gender or not. But I think that's a very good observation. But this question of democratic rights, I think democratic rights and democratic institutions and democratic processes actually don't work under populists. And Trump's January 6th, taking over Congress, or Imran Khan saying that I'm going to dismiss so and so and so and so, I'm going to take over the Supreme Court and do this, and these judges, they don't listen to me, and only those decisions which are good, which are in my favor or PTI's favor, are the right decisions. So, when the slogan of I am the people or I am the institutions happens, the democratic processes, because of the authoritarian nature, and I think it's not just populism, it's authoritarianism and populism is authoritarian. So I think, so this question of leftists, you do, as we said, we agree that there are leftist populists as well. So populism can also emerge amongst the left, and they can counter it. I mean, is Lula a populist? I think he used to be. I don't know if he's going to be now, but he certainly was, and so was, the people from the Workers' Party and so on, and Chavez and others. They've been populists who have been leftists. So I think you can have, if you had a leftist with charisma in countries, which we are talking about, you could have a leftist answer to right-wing populism. So I think that is a possibility. Aristotle?
Yes.
You have a mic.
Am I fine? Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. In my view, for the left to exist as such and to play its historical role, it cannot be populistic. It should find ways to be popular, yes, but not populistic. To the degree that it's right, the people of the left, that they refer to the majority, to the impoverished, to the working class, to the unemployed, then they should find a way to be popular with them without being populistic, especially under the light of what I mentioned before, the unprecedented environmental crisis, and who knows what's connected to this. Now, about the issue of the connection to gender, I think it's actually deeper and worse than you implied, because by itself, I mean, without going into the content of the social media-related technologies, just that all technologies in historical capitalism and in recent decades are explicitly ideologized as deliberating women, as being, emancipating from the perspective of gender, and they end up reproducing the same gender biases. So inherently, they are problematic. If I may state, not a disagreement, just a question about part of your point, well, actually, I'm not sure that anybody in Europe right now, I'll stay to Europe, which is what I know best, including the Finnish Prime Minister, is not populistic.
No.
Because I think it's populist. The way everybody in Europe, even in Scandinavia, they are simplifying the complexities of the energy crisis, for example. They simplify the overall complexity of what we are facing. To me, is very populistic. And the demands from a country like Finland, like Sweden, like Norway, are too high. You are not talking about Greece now. You are talking about the Scandinavian tradition of social democracy. If they are populistic, even little less than the rest, then we're in trouble. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to also ask to Aristotle what you think about the Tsipras. They were also good representative of the leftist populist party and the leader. No, I mean, I would like to hear what you think about it. But I would just like to briefly answer the question directly asked to me about what could be the safeguards to prevent, populists to overturn the democratic system. This is a 1 million question, actually. But from the experience of Turkey, I could say that there should be some restrictions to bring some of the constitutional changes to referendum. For example, back in 2010, the High Judiciary, Constitutional Court, and the Council of the Judges and Prosecutors, the composition of it, have been changed through a referendum, like many things. And this is one of the basic symptoms or the tools of populist governments. They always go to referendums because they go to directly to the people. But most of the time, people are not knowledgeable about those issues. So I think the scope of the subjects that can be put in the referendum might be restricted. This is this might be one of the tools. Thank you. This is a very good question, actually.
One thing I think we'll have to end, I'm sorry, but one thing I'd like to say is regarding the future, Trump has gone, but there's another crazy person, DeSantis, who's the governor of Florida, who's now emerging as the new Trump. Modi probably will go away one day, but then you have Yogi behind. I don't know if you follow Indian politics. And then in Pakistan, there's Imran Khan, but we also now have Mona Salahi. So there's this joke in Europe that there's light at the end of the tunnel, but it's actually another train approaching. So it's an endless, could be an endless disaster, but we hope that you got some idea of the intensity of debates around this term and the kinds of questions they are posing, not just to political theorists, but also to societies. And I agree with Dr. Tympas's suggestion that we can be popular without being populist. Now, we don't have time to go into what that means, but that's something that we can probably discuss some other day. Thank you to all the panelists, and thank you to all the audience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. After a 15-minute break, the next session will be on the topic.
He is. Thank you so much.
Thank you.